Now, in other news, the US President Donald Trump is in Beijing today, where he's meeting China's President Xi Jinping. It's the first such visit by a US leader to China in nearly a decade, and talks so far have focused primarily on trade and on Taiwan, with Xi warning that disagreement over the island's future could even lead to conflict. However, the pair did exchange a cordial welcome a bit earlier on, emphasizing the links between the United States and China.
The American and Chinese people share much in common. We value hard work, we value courage and achievement, we love our families, and we love our countries. Together we have the chance to draw on these values to create a future of greater prosperity, cooperation, and happiness, and peace for our children. We love our children. This region and the world, it's a special world with the two of us united and together.
The people of China and the United States are both great peoples. Achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and making America great again can go hand in hand. We can help each other succeed and advance the well-being of the whole world.
And covering the summit for us is Yenna Li, our correspondent in Beijing. She has the update for us from there.
Chinese President Xi Jinping kicked off the talks with one overarching message, and that is Taiwan is his priority when it comes to the US-China relationship. If the US gets it right, then there would be no problems moving forward. Should they get it wrong, then he says they could be heading towards conflict. Taiwan was not at all mentioned in the White House's version of the first day of the talks. The Trump administration is more focused on trade and on the war in Iran. They have been underlining the fact that China has shown interest in buying US agricultural products, Boeing jets, as well as petrol. They've also mentioned that there has been agreement on both sides that the Strait of Hormuz should remain opened. No major breakthrough then as expected, but any improvements, even small when it comes to trade, would be seen as a success for both Beijing and for Washington. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's state visit is trending here in China on social media. The hashtag about the visit has been seen 400 million times and counting. Now, of course, the internet here is monitored and censored, the topics curated by officials, but there is genuine interest here, it must be said. We've seen crowds milling around to take photos of Air Force One landing, crowds again outside Donald Trump's hotel here in central Beijing, quite a few locals as well, hoping to get a glimpse of Donald Trump's famous motorcade.
That's Yenna Li for us there. Now, there has been some reaction today from the government in Taiwan to that meeting between Trump and Yi, and particularly over that warning of possible future conflict. Here then is the Deputy Minister Lang Wen-chie.
I must emphasize once again that if maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait is the greatest common denominator between China and the United States, then the Chinese Communist Party should restrain its acts of military intimidation.
Well, to talk a bit more about this story, I'm pleased now to welcome to the programme David Sachs. He's an Asia Studies Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Hello to you, and thanks for speaking to us here on France 24.
Thanks for having me.
Look, first of all, what do you make of these comments by President Xi over clashes, even conflict, he says, possibly with the United States on the issue of Taiwan?
Well, I think to the uninitiated, this sounds like quite stark, charged rhetoric from the Chinese. But for those of us who look at this on a daily basis, there was nothing really new in Xi's formulation on Taiwan. This is language that he's largely used before. And the Chinese have telegraphed before President Trump landed in Beijing that Taiwan would be a top priority. We heard this from senior Chinese officials in the weeks and days leading up to the summit. So we knew that Xi Jinping was going to raise this with President Trump. And, I think that the good news here is that Xi's warning was fairly standard from what we would expect from the Chinese. Interestingly, Taiwan did not figure at all in the US readout. And when President Trump was standing beside Xi Jinping at the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, reporters asked him about Taiwan, and he showed uncharacteristic restraint. He did not take the bait and answer any questions on Taiwan. So I think that President Trump understands, in a sense, just how sensitive this is, and that he didn't want to say anything that maybe inadvertently even would have caused a diplomatic kind of uproar in Beijing.
And the fact that Trump kept quiet on this issue, as you say, that's rather unusual for him. Does that suggest perhaps that for this American administration, given everything else that they are dealing with China, that actually Taiwan just isn't the top of their priorities?
Well, I think clearly from the Trump administration perspective, they don't want to discuss Taiwan with China. Their priority is the economic relationship, and the U.S. readout heavily prioritized trade and even investment. The Trump administration wants to establish a board of trade with China to manage bilateral trade. Secretary Bessent mentioned after the meetings in his media appearances that there's even talk of a board of investment now under consideration. The Trump administration is also putting a lot of weight in China restricting the flow of precursors that are used to make fentanyl. They want China to commit to major agricultural purchases and Boeing aircraft, but Taiwan doesn't really figure on the agenda. Clearly for China, though, Taiwan is a top priority, perhaps even the top priority. So the question is whether the two sides can find a way to move forward on their respective agendas without having a clash over Taiwan. I think, on the one hand, the Trump administration did approve a massive $11 billion arms package to Taiwan at the end of 2025. We know that there's a $14 billion arms package on the president's desk that he has delayed for a few months now. And so I think the real question, for instance, is what the fate of the arms package looks like. President Trump has invited Xi Jinping to pay a reciprocal visit to the United States in September of this year. I think a major question is whether that arms package will go forward before September, or whether, because of Xi Jinping's warnings over Taiwan, it continues to be held through the end of the year. So I think that that's going to be a major indicator going forward of how the Trump administration is going to handle U.S.-Taiwan relations.
And beyond the question of Taiwan, on this trip with Donald Trump were a number of tech executives, among them Elon Musk. I just would love to get your thoughts on why you think Musk was there as well. Of course, he no longer works for Donald Trump. So commercial interests, we imagine, at play. Tesla, potentially a factory in China. I mean, why do you think Musk is on this trip?
Well, I think that he's still close to Trump. I think that they've made up to some extent. As you noted, Tesla has major factories in the Shanghai area as well that produces a lot of Tesla's cars. To me, the most interesting inclusion, the one most carefully scrutinized and watched, is NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. He wasn't on the plane leaving from Washington, but he flew to Alaska and joined up while the Air Force One was refueling. President Trump issued a social media post about Jensen Huang's inclusion. And really, the big question going forward, and we'll have to see how this plays out tomorrow, is what the future of export controls look like towards China. We know that Beijing does not want further export controls, and in fact, they want a relaxation of current export controls. They want access to those chips that they need to develop AI models that can compete with the US leaders in the field. And the notion, I think, is that Jensen Huang's inclusion on the trip could mean that there will be more green lighting of sales of NVIDIA chips to China, which in my view would be a bad thing. We should not sell the most advanced chips to China. But I think that most in the China watching space in the United States are watching for that much more than Elon Musk's inclusion.
All right, and just a final question for you. Another big global issue that we imagine may be discussed, even though we haven't heard much about it yet, is Iran, the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, economically, getting oil moving through there is key for China. How important do you think that is? Do you think that is being discussed actively behind the scenes between the Chinese and the American officials?
Yeah, Iran did figure in the U.S. readout. According to the White House statement, Xi Jinping agreed that a toll should not be paid on the Strait of Hormuz, and also that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. I think that China does have an interest in the Strait of Hormuz reopening. It is obviously a major net importer of fossil fuels and is Iran's largest buyer of energy supplies. Around half of China's energy that it imports, I believe, transits the Strait of Hormuz. So it has been drawing down on its strategic reserves, but that can only buy so much time. I think as the blockade continues, China clearly wants the Strait of Hormuz reopened. At the same time, though, Xi Jinping does not want to look like it is doing the United States' bidding. It wants to be seen as a supporter of Iran, which is a longtime partner of China's in the Middle East. So it is a very difficult path for China to walk. But I do believe that President Trump likely asked Xi Jinping to exert some pressure on Iran to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. I think that China might be doing some work behind the scenes, but it's not going to just act as a proxy for U.S. interests here.
All right, great to get your analysis. Thank you so much. David Sachs talking to us there from the Council on Foreign Relations.